Welcome to the Wednesday, September 7th meeting of the Assessors of Stockbridge. Mike, do you want to start?
Yep. Good morning. So last week's last meeting minutes, I carried forward the number 4, the Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum, and the certification. So the update on the fiscal year 23 valuation certification. We are in review right now. So the sales have been submitted, and Joe Barberi with the Department of Revenue is hopefully this week going to sign off on the sales. That's the first step. So we're literally going over the ones that I coded out, the 34 that we used in the 1-year period. I have everything done, all the backup ready to go, but he doesn't want it submitted until he approves the sales. And one thing that's a little different this time around is they're not coming out to the town. And I don't know if that's something that was a directive from, the higher ups, but typically they're here for like a few days or a couple of weeks, couple days out of a few weeks, and they're not doing that. So everything has to be PDF'd or sent as a spreadsheet. Well, they're working from home still with no directive to go back into the office unless it's an emergency. So that's probably why. And I told them, whatever, even the maps that I pieced together, like around the bowl, I got big sectional maps that are highlights and pieced together. He's like, just take a picture of it and send it to me. I said, okay, it's a little bit different. So I think we're good. No big issues on the sales. And I had to send an early version of the LA4. And that always sends up a little alarm when it says that your values went up by more than 10%. But they did. There's no way around it. He'll sign off on that when we do our new growth. But so far so good. The only thing he did request was the top 5 taxpayers for this year and last year, which I'm working on right now. That's it. Everything else is ready to go. There was a change on the commercial sale. We had one on Main Street that we were using. It was 44 Main Street, and just one of those things that it was just overlooked. It was 2 points out of range of the residential. And I thought because it's commercial, it's on its own. But one of the new things is every single class has to be within 5 points of your median residential. So our median residential is 99% market value. I had that one at 1.05, and I had to redo all the commercial based on that one. All the income approaches had to be redone on those styles. I redid them, submitted, and it works. It's at 1.02 now. So hopefully the next time we meet, we'll be done. We'll be able to start unless he finds something that's way out there, which I hope he doesn't, we should be good to go to start our public disclosure. Number 3, available state and local tax relief exemptions. I put this on the agenda because tomorrow night there's going to be Mike Canales is going to be giving a presentation on the available state and local tax relief exemptions we have, because obviously there's been a lot of talk about the residential exemption, and by request of the selectmen for us to put together, and Mike basically did most of it with the PowerPoint, and I just found the brand new numbers for the cost of living adjustments. But while we were doing this, a lot of talk has come up about a clause that maybe was overlooked before. How we have the clause 41C for the elderly, and we have the 41D, which is the extension off of 41C. We have the 17 and the 41. Each community has to have at least one of those. There's an actual clause 41C and a half that can actually provide better relief than what we're giving. And it would mean that we would have to adjust, going forward. And I believe at town meeting, and Mike can talk a little bit if he would like to about why. I actually think it's something we should be doing because we can only offer at this point $500 as the maximum under the 41. That doesn't get adjusted by the cost of living. The 17E gets adjusted and I think that's 348 off of 275. Used to be 275. We can adjust that amount every year by the cost of living adjustment, which was quite high. It was 7% Social Security this year. So it's probably the biggest adjustment that we've seen, but it still doesn't bring the 500. It's still going to stay 500. All it does is adjust the amounts that when we give them the application, how far up we can go on the income and the equity minus the Social Security deduction. 41C.5 is a little bit different, and there's only a few communities that do it. So Mike, did you want to just talk a little about that?
Yeah.
I printed out the IGR for it.
When I saw this, coming up, there's been a bunch of discussion about exemptions. Now, one thing I do want to say is the residential exemption, not talking about that with you guys, that's a shift. That has nothing to do with the Board of Assessors, just like the CIP shift or anything else. I actually think, I mentioned this to Mike, I think it's terrible naming by calling it the residential exemption. They think it's like all the rest of these exemptions. So Chapter 59.5 dictates all the exemptions that are allowed under the Board of Assessors. And those are your blind, veterans, your 41C, which is your elderly one. And how those fit in. So like Mike said, right now, we start at age 70 with a $500 exemption that people can get. So right off the bat, one of the options we can do at town meeting is you can lower the age of the 71D or 41D from 70 to 65, and you can increase the exemption from 500 to 1,000. That just that would be a town meeting vote and would come into effect for next budget season. So that's something that can be done under the current exemption we have right now. That you just can go to town meeting, it can be a recommendation from the select board, Board of Assessors to change 41D.
So could you confirm, so this is also based on other qualifying stuff?
The normal, it doesn't change any of the qualifiers for 41D. It just lowers the age and increases the exemption.
No, but also, so somebody listening to the meeting and not looking at the details, just because you're age 70 or age 65 and happen to have a really big house and really big income, you're not necessarily qualifying for this exemption.
Right, there's an income.
Okay, that's why I just wanted for it to be said that you still must qualify for this.
The 41D is 23,000 without the Social Security deduction. 28,000 with it.
And those are the new numbers.
7,000 married, 36,000 with a Social Security deduction. So those are your income levels.
Yeah. So just to be clear, so it's not for everybody. It's only for people that qualify based on income and age and
income and age.
But this one would.
Two that we can change does allow us to reduce the age and increase the exemption. 41C.5 has only been approved by two communities. Revere and Ashland. And I did ask the question of why, and I have spoken to the communities, and so back when 41C.5 was put into play, there was a lot of questions, was it well written, and they actually updated it. What you guys have in front of you is the updated 41C.5 in 2017. So it's a recent change, and the biggest thing with 41C is that there is no asset. It reduces the asset limit to 0. So you don't even look into assets, what they have. So, well, 41D says that you're going to have assets up to a certain dollar amount excluding your home. This just gets rid of asset requirements, period.
so they don't look at it.
Don't look at it at all. And it increases the income for a household to 62,000. Whether married, single, whatever, puts it at the lowest level of what's called the circuit breaker regulation in your income tax for seniors. So, and once again, it can be 65 or up to 70, depending on what age you want to do. One thing about that is that it could almost a lot of communities haven't touched it because it can qualify. Obviously, it's more than doubling the income requirements for a single person and nearly doubling it for a married couple. So a lot more people would qualify under the 41C1/2. The other thing is the 41C1/2 is based off of the single family average cost. So last year for Stockbridge, if we had gone to the maximum, which would be 20%, it would have been a $977 exemption, which is actually still lower than 41C, which can go to 1,000. Now that will trickle up over time as assessments and tax rates go up. So for a lot of communities, it's not even worth, it's easier to just go with the 41C because you can go right to $1,000.
Right.
If you're in a community that say is valued under 300,000 for an average home, it's not even worth.
Like North
It's
Adams,
not
where
even
we're
worth,
from.
right, it's not even worth looking at because the exemption amount would go so low.
It'd be under 500.
So, and speaking Ashland, the average is over 500,000, so is ours. So looking at this, it's an exemption. It still qualifies under the exemption where the state picks up 500 of the exemption, just like it does under the 41D. We have a cap of only 19 based on our population. So the state only reimburses up to 19. And based on Mike's data, last year we had 4. And the 2 years before that, we had 5 and 5.
That's just the number for how many would be reimbursed. That's not how many can qualify.
So I think we've asked for that information in the past, and we were told that the cherry sheet doesn't really provide, or, so we do know.
Yeah, there's a,
Yeah.
down in DOI, Division of Local Services, you can go to the exemption page and it tells you how many exemptions have been given out. And it says your limit. So we do have a limit. Our surviving spouse is like 350. Our senior exemption is 19. And blind is unlimited. If it's blind, it's blind, period. And veterans is unlimited. So there's no caps on those two. So there is for senior spouse, like I said, it's 350 for us, and then 19 for the 41. Any 41 exemption we get, regardless of what one it's under.
So that's the maximum that we can get reimbursed for.
Right.
Can we go above that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that is an option. So we get 100% reimbursement up to a certain level, and theoretically, if the town wanted to go above it,
Right.
that's up to them.
Yep. And if you go to 1,000, we'd only be getting
500.
100. Or if you go with 41C1/2, you'd be getting, like last year would have been 977. We got 500 back and would have been 477. The question is by getting rid of the asset requirement and increasing the single family or the household income to 62, you could have a lot of people now qualify for it.
And then just going back, so the ownership has to be a primary residence.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very similar to the 41s.
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, I just want to sort of said for the record that,
Yeah.
And I'm sure it would be, probably more popular in other communities if their values were like our values, because that's where that amount, it's pointless if you're coming from like a Pittsfield or North Adams, because those average valuations are nowhere near what Stockbridge is. So this helps, Stockbridge's valuation and the way our values seem to tend to go helps this and will continue to help it. Even the tax rate helps it.
Yeah. It's just an interesting one. Only, like I said, only 2 communities did because the way it was originally written, only one person in the household had to qualify for the circuit breaker, not both. And then it was pointed out, you could have a family where somebody's making 250,000, the other one's working part-time for 10, they could get the exemption. They cleared that up in 2017 and they put it to the household. So they have cleaned up this law, but it's still a very, like Mike pointed out correctly, unless your assessed values are way up and you're also willing to bite at the fact that the income requirement's gonna go up and there's gonna be no asset requirement, that becomes a big one. But these are enacted through town meeting. So this would be a town meeting vote if the people wanted to enact these. So that's why I thought when Mike had on, I thought I'd just come and speak to the 2 that we have, because these are specifically section 59.5, which falls under the Board of Assessors, and we would want a recommendation or something down the road if we decided to go to town meeting to make some of these changes.
And with the average, the average bill going up, every year, the state is never going to change that 500 under a regular 41C. That's why they give you the option to go above that and beyond that. when I first started in assessing in our local groups, we would rally, they go to the Capitol steps to try to get,
Oh, reimbursement.
yeah, the reimbursement or to up the 41C this was before they allow communities to go and make up the difference. So you could literally go up to 1,000, but you're not going to be reimbursed for the additional 500. It's just not in their realm of whatever they're going to do to change that 500 for a typical 41. So we're just looking at everything that can possibly help the public, especially the group that seems to be, targeted for the residential exemption, that there are alternatives to give, $500 on a $4,000 bill really isn't that much, but $1,000 on a $4,000 bill, that could change things for a lot of people. So we just want to put it out there that it is an option to what we have.
So my plan is I'm going to review with the Board of Selectmen all of the 59 fives. And then I am going to review with them the means tested residential exemption, which is, those are done by home rule petition. And then the residential exemption shift. So I'm going to go over all those with them Thursday night. If they decide to look at the 41, ask to come back to the 41s, I think that I'm going to recommend that it starts with you guys because 59.5 really falls under the Board of Assessors. So I know this is confusing and I get told this a lot. So like I said, 59.5 are your regular exemptions that fall under the Board of Assessors. Nothing to do with tax shifts, which, like I said, I think it's incorrectly labeled. Residential exemption is a shift, and that's just under the jurisdiction of the select board. So.
And I know when we did the add-ons to the 17, which always was 275, and that would be the lower amount for elderly residents that didn't qualify for the higher amount. We'd always say, okay, well, let's try to put you on the 17. When we enacted, and I can't remember exactly what year it was, but the Board of Assessors thought, how can we, I think we were thinking that we could adjust that $500 amount. So we not a lot of communities went with the extensions. They kept their 41Cs. We went with the extension, but what it really only did on the 41 is allow us to adjust how far up we can go on the income every year based on the cost of living adjustment. It will never change that 500. This will change it, and it'll keep it above 500 as long as, our assessments are never going to just all of a sudden drop down to what a North Adams would be. This is Stockbridge. So that is always going to be in place. We were thinking we were doing a good thing, which we did, trying to get that amount. The 17E from 275 to 348 also affects the surviving spouses as well. That gets encompassed in the 17. So that does help on that. That's going to continue to keep going up, but the actual elderly exemption is never going to change. And the idea that, we're all of a sudden going to have a ton of people coming in that are elderly that will meet the income requirements, I don't think that would happen unless we change something. And there's also there's the circuit breaker and the deferral, which we've talked about the deferral before. We really haven't talked that much about the circuit breaker, which is done more on a state level through your state taxes.
Which a lot of assessing departments just note people to be aware of it.
Right.
Not something that you guys necessarily need to, and then we are allowed to take the deferral. We can take the two changes you can make to the deferral is you can take the 8% base interest rate and lower it down to anywhere from 8 to 1%. Or you can also take the income, which is set at 20,000 as a household.
Which is so low.
Up to the circuit breaker total of 62.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, one thing I want to say, I know recently a neighboring town had this same discussion about the deferral, and it was sort of said that it doesn't affect the tax rate, which is not a true statement, because anytime you defer income or you give these deductions, the money has to come from somewhere.
Well, we're not getting any it's not coming at the overlay.
An amount of applications for deferral, you should be able to cover on your overlay.
But still, on the overlay, it's still coming out of taxpayer money.
Yes.
I mean,
Right,
so.
all of this is.
Right, when you're
Yeah.
trying to raise $1 and somebody's only paying 99
Yeah,
cents.
definitely, there's no.
The penny has to be paid from somewhere. So, I mean, so sometimes when people say this doesn't really affect the tax rate, it doesn't affect other taxpayers, that is not a true statement.
A better statement would be minimal.
Right,
We're talking maybe a couple pennies on the tax rate, unless you have huge amount of people apply for it.
right. And I'm sure the state would look at, when we do our reimbursements, I have to tell them in each category how many, we're trying to get reimbursed for, how many we actually gave out. If they saw that number jump significantly, but didn't see our overlay jump as well, I'm sure a red flag would go up.
Yeah.
They would, we would probably, even without them telling us the obvious, that we would increase the overlay to cover. You never know until you actually do it and see how many, obviously the applicants that we've had come in that, through privacy, of course, we can't say who it is, but there have been some that they're right there on the cusp of it, and we can't qualify them because they don't meet the income or the equity requirements.
And then on the deferral, I mean, so I guess if you look in the long term, if it takes 10 years for it to get paid back, theoretically, the town would be whole in the long term. In the short term, it would be a deficit. But it's also, it would be subject to the bank approving this type of lien, because a municipal lien would be put in front of a bank.
Yes.
Yes,
So a bank or a reverse mortgage.
If they sell a mortgage, their companies are not gonna like the fact that, I don't believe the banks can, they're not gonna like it. I'm not sure what recourse they have to stop the deferral and that.
But I think they must be approved.
yeah, there is a form that has to be
Signed
sent
off.
to us.
So I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in other words, if someone's getting close on equity, I don't necessarily
If they
think.
own their home, obviously, then there is no issue with the deferral. But right, that's the thing, the deferral, that's why they're not used a lot. They're really not. I mean, somebody's really gotta be in a very difficult situation
Yep,
than that. But right now, with the income as a household at 20,000, it's almost unusable by any community
Right.
at the base level. And that's why, looking around, there are a number of communities that have increased that threshold. And you don't have to go all the way to 62, you could set it somewhere in between, or you could set it to the circuit breaker, and then you don't have to worry about making future adjustments. It just adjusts with the circuit breaker.
and the state would give us that number every year.
And so again, just to circle back, so that is all done by taxpayer vote or by
Town meeting.
town meeting vote. Town meeting.
All 59 fives are adjusted by town meeting vote.
Does the 41C, is that town meeting or is that, what was the one that actually has to be done through the election?
41C, actually, the first time it's
The
implemented,
first time it's implemented.
And
it
who,
has to be by ballot, not by town meeting, town election. Then once it's approved, every year at town meeting, if you're making any adjustments to the percentages or whatever, if you're gonna tweak the program, then it's a town meeting vote. But when you first go to enact it, it's actually a ballot.
and so who's making those adjustments? Is it the select board or is it the assessors?
It could be either to put it forward to town meeting.
Yeah, that's right.
I think similar to the budget, you would want to have all your committees
Right.
supporting it, just like we try to get the finance committee and select board to agree on what's going forward. This case, we want the board of assessors and select board to agree. Because I feel like at town meeting, it's very confusing if one board's saying yes and one saying no. I think it's a lot clearer to come to a consensus ahead of time.
So just circling back, so I think we originally said that the state allows us 19 of these exemptions
1941s.
and we've
Whatever
only,
category we choose to
so we only use 3.
for.
4, okay.
Yep.
So but they're gonna limit out at 500, correct? So if we did do something like this for 1,000, the state would be on the hook for 15 of these at 500. And then anything above, I might be, so
15 additional.
15 additional, right?
Yeah.
So we get capped out at 19 at 500 apiece. So anything above the 500 would be by the town.
Yeah,
But theoretically, the first 500 of the additional ones would be picked up by the state.
yes.
Okay.
I think we got somebody on. So,
Yeah,
Just one.
Right.
3, okay. Are there any questions any other questions? I mean, tomorrow's meeting is, Mike has a
Yeah.
PowerPoint presentation that is gonna cover everything that is on a local and state level.
And after I give that to the select board, I'm more than willing to come and present the whole PowerPoint to this board too.
well, I know you could probably just send it to us, Mike.
All right, I can send it to you Friday night.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
It's really
present it
good.
first. Actually, you can see the PowerPoint, I'm sorry, you can see the PowerPoint, I won't present it. It's available right in the packet, I can send it to you guys today.
Okay.
The PowerPoint's available, but then I'm gonna just
Yeah.
walk them through.
Sure.
I was more than willing to come back and answer any questions or
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that too. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
That way it gives the audience a chance to hear it twice too.
Just one question on the residential exemption that has been discussed. How many towns have instituted it and across the state?
My understanding is there's 16 communities that have done the residential exemption. There are 5 that I know of that have done a means tested one. The hard part about that is there's no database for that because those are home rule petition. So unless me and Mike went through all 360 communities in the state and looked at what they had, we wouldn't be able to tell. But what we did is the town of Lexington did a study. And at that time, there were only known to be, and I think the study's from like 2015, there were only 5 communities that have done a means tested exemption. So
You have to go to your
that's what we
legislators.
know. There's 16 with the pure exemption adopted that section of law. And then there's 5 that have done their own home rule petition. There might be a couple more, but 5 that we know.
When I was doing my research, I found one town that basically didn't have a lot of secondary homeowners that were adopting it or may have adopted it because they were doing it as a progressive tax against the homeowners that had higher limits. So again, if you had a
Right.
smaller house and you were getting $150,000 exemption, it would be a 50% reduction. Whereas if you were assessed for $1 million, you're talking a 15%. So I just thought it was
That's an interesting
interesting
way.
that it's not just a residential exemption, it's a progressive tax against people that have bigger houses than people that have smaller houses. So I just thought it was interesting that one municipality used it as a
Wow.
progressive tax, not just a residential tax.
Yeah, that's true. It can be. Any other questions?
No, I mean, I think that we'll invite Mike back too.
Definitely. And again, the earliest that any of the changes can be done would be next May, other than the residential exemption.
Right.
And so, Michael, how are you being able to address the town's taxpayers' questions in a reasonable period of time
About the residential exemption?
about just everything? Yeah.
I'm trying. I mean, I want to make sure that before I answer anything, especially about the residential exemption, that I have a chance to really look at what they're asking, because, we have been extremely, I don't want to say careful, but just, I want to make sure that I can get the information to the second homeowners for whatever information they're looking for. And they do realize that at this point, because I've made it very clear that, we're in a reval this year and there's a lot that's involved in it. And it's the utmost important to everybody that we have enough time to finish it. And, you can talk about the tax classification, everything else that comes with it. None of that could happen until we're done with our evaluations. That is the key right now. Including implementing anything at this point. So yeah, I feel that I've made it clear that, my time, and again, being a public official, if somebody needs something, they can put in a request, for us to get that information to them. I would hope that they give us enough time up front, just out of respect for what we're trying to get done, to get that information to them in a timely manner without having to go through, a request, a Public Information Act request, which is, it can be done, but at this point, I think I've given as much information as I can. And we're limited, we're limited to releasing only the fiscal year 22 information on all the reports and everything. So I have to make it very clear that whatever information you're putting out there, whether it's being used, to fight a residential exemption or, in favor of a residential exemption or anything else, that right now the information that I have is only available for us and the state until they give us permission to release that data. But yeah, I mean, once this is done, it's going to be a race to the end, to get the tax bills out. But we're prepared either way. Whatever happens, we have to deal with whatever decisions are made. But we're still going to be prepared to get people the information that they're looking for one way or another. Might take a little bit more time. And if there's specific information that's going to be used at the tax classification hearing, we'll do whatever we can, to make sure that people get their information. I just don't want to give out any information that shouldn't be released right now. And I'm just trying to, and everyone's been very good about that. The second homeowners have been great, as far as accepting that, just be a little bit patient. We'll get the information that you need. So I don't think it's been that bad, but again, I've been trying to just tell everyone that the major thing that us as the board and myself are trying to do is get this certification of the valuations, which is every 5 years, but there is a lot of stuff that's involved in it. And at any point it could change like that, and it could push things out a little bit further. Has it been stressful? Absolutely, but it's part of the job, and we'll deal with it.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you for dealing with that.
Did you want to wait until the end or?
Well, if it's anything to do with this, I think we ought to ask them now.
Okay.
Is there anyone that's out there from the community? Did you have questions about anything about the exemptions
Yes,
or local tax relief?
Peter Angaro's raising his hand. He's there now.
Peter?
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I just wanted to comment to the board and thank Michael for his responsiveness to some of us who have asked him for data and other information to understand the complexities of the residential tax exemption and the data behind the community information in Stockbridge and part-time versus full-time ownership in the town. I do appreciate all of his work and his responsiveness, and we do understand the constraints he's under with the reval and other work. So I just wanted to say thank you and let the board know he's been extremely responsive, at least to me and others that have asked for information.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Anything else for Mike? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, number 4.
Okay, so did you guys get the email that I sent you with the revised questions from Donna?
Yes.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
I really want to send these out by the end of the week. Did you have any issues with them? I printed them out again.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like she changed much. She combined a few things.
Good.
A little bit repetitive on a few of the questions, but I think at this point, they're worded perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much time do you want to give? If we have this sent out certified by the end of the week, what should their response time be? I mean, we are now going into, mid-September. And at this point, whatever decision, once they get the questions back and it's before the classification hearing, because of certification, chances are I won't be able to change anything at this point. Whatever decision is made, for example, if you were to not go along with this exemption, they would have to apply for an abatement once the tax bill is out. It's just too late at this point to make. I'm sending in the LA4 with all the valuations right now. I'm sure Joe would allow 1 or 2 changes, but I can't speak for him right at the moment. So would you think maybe October 1?
I think it's in their best interest to respond back in a timely fashion.
But don't put a date.
No, I think you have to put a date.
Okay.
Let's make it no more than 30 days or
So let's,
something reasonable, but I think they have to understand it's just in their best to, but it's also, does the form and the questionnaire make it clear that it has to be as of 7?
No, but this is just a
Question.
I'll write this up, all the changes I have
Yeah.
to write up again, but I'll put as of July 1st.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we say October 3rd is a Monday, do you think that would be enough time? Or we can give till?
Well,
And again, if, hopefully they get it back in that time, and if
Yeah.
not, we're still going to review it.
Exactly.
We just sort of
Yeah, they're
want,
waiting anyway.
Yeah.
Now they know.
I mean,
Okay.
why don't we just say we hope that we could get it back by the 3rd?
Okay.
You know, if they can't, then,
yeah.
we'll deal with it when we get it.
Okay. Right, then that will finally take care of that. And number 5, any other?
Is there anybody else out there on Zoom that has any questions for us?
No, no?
Okay. We have to go into.
Yep.
So at this point, to our audience, I'm going to entertain a vote to move into executive session per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to discuss and review motor vehicle abatements and the property tax exempt status for several properties, and we will not be returning to an open session once we're done with our executive session. So I would ask for a motion to move into executive session,
So move to executive session.
and the chair votes yes.
Yes.
So at this point, we're closing our regular session, and we're moving into executive session. So thank you all very much who've tuned in.
Thank you.
And those who are going to watch at a later date. So we'll see you all at our next meeting. Bye now.
Thank you.